This is week 11. Technically, last week was the last week, but we've had an extra week tacked on to the end. And we're going to need it to complete the text. But also, I did want an opportunity to amplify some of the pivotal reasons and approaches to emptiness as a topic, because it's the chief concern of the last verses. And I'm going to deal with the verses directly next week. And then in the last week, I'm going to just sort of ad lib, if you like, just to discuss more loosely the issues that were invoked by that. So it's really going to be a two-part presentation, which will also coincide with the end of the text, which of course is an auspicious accomplishment for us all to actually have arrived at the end with successful comprehension. That's really very rare. So today I'm going to start with a motivation, and it's drawn from the Great Mind Training collection, which is this very impressive volume translated exquisitely by Thupten Jinpa. And this particular text is a short text within that volume, and it's attributed to Drom Tompa, Atisha's chief Tibetan disciple, though it's not exactly established. However, it has been enshrined as a core lojong text for many centuries. So in that text, the following: what is referred to as the Mahayana mind training has been taught in general in all the teachings, such as the scriptural collections that compose the sacred words. In particular, in the chapter on meditation in the Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life by Shantideva, it's stated, quote, recognizing oneself as flawed and seeing others as an ocean of virtue, you should relinquish self-grasping and practice as well the embracing of others. And the author goes on to distill the meaning of verses such as these, engage in the following contemplation. So I'm going to ask us to engage in contemplation. This is really an analytical presentation for our establishing the framework for Tonlen. Generally speaking, there are 84,000 afflictions that cause us to wander in cyclic existence. When condensed, they are subsumed under 6 root afflictions and 20 derivative afflictions. And at the root of these all lies self-grasping. Where no intrinsic reality exists, I have grasped at I and self and have taken its side and fought for its sake. Because of this, what ought to have been positive karma has turned into negative karma. And as a consequence, I have fallen into suffering. This is because, on my part, I took the self side and fought with others for its sake. In the future too, if I do not relinquish this self-grasping, I'll roam in the cycle of existence as I do now. I have no doubt that it is this self-cherishing demon, the so-called I or self, that forces me to suffer in all 3 times, in the past, in the present, and in the future, all because of taking its side and fighting on its behalf. There is nothing in what I see, hear, or think about what I have not harnessed for the sake of the self. It has not enabled me to get any further from cyclic existence, so I must now let go of it as best as I can. I must let go of it for the sake of becoming an heroic bodhisattva. Thinking thus, let it go entirely. Let it go naturally and with ease, and let it go by thoroughly dismantling it. I'll read that again because it's such an extraordinary instruction. Thinking thus, let it go entirely. Let it go naturally and with ease, and let it go by thoroughly dismantling it. You can't say that sentient beings are by themselves generally not worthy, for they are my kind parents. Therefore, imagine that you take away the negative actions, the causes and the sufferings, the fruits that persist in sentient beings. Take them away as if shearing off with a sharp razor, shearing them off with a sharp razor, and imagine that they come to be realized upon your own body. Then imagine that your own happiness and virtues ripen upon sentient beings. Meditate on the reversal and exchange of these two situations. You should also mentally sow the roots of virtue of all the Buddhas and bodhisattvas so that they come to fruition on sentient beings. So we can actually draw on the Buddhas and bodhisattvas, incredible, unbelievable fonts of merit, and then visualize them going towards sentient beings as well. And then this is the crunch and the very beautiful line. This is the real meaning of the Mahayana training of mind, the master said. End of quote. And I think there's every reason to deduce that the master here would be a teacher who's responsible for bringing these teachings into Tibet. So this is a really remarkable passage because it's the complete summation of everything we're aiming to do in these classes. So with incredible burgeoning mind of bodhicitta, I'll recite the verses and then I'll ask Stephen to lead the prayers. Dena Jesun Lama Tuje Chen Magudrowe Dig Drib Dugna Kun Maludata Dadla Mimpa Dandagi Degi Jen Latang Wai Drokunde Dang Dempa Jingi Lo Dena Jesun Lama Tu Chen Magudrowe Dig Drib Dunel Kun Maludata Daglamin Padang Dagi Jeji Zen La Tangwa Hidrokun Dedang Dempa Jingilo Dena Jesun Lama Tuje Chen Magudrowe Didridungakun Maludata Dadlamimpa Dang Dagi De Negation la tang wai. Trokunde dang ten pa jin lodro kunde dang ten pa jin lo. So thank you.
Opening prayers. Praise to Shakyamuni Buddha, to the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan. I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. Homage to the Supreme Buddha. Homage to the Dharma refuge. Homage to the great Sangha. To all three, ever devout homage. To all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as many as all realms' atoms in all aspects, with supreme faith, I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions. Perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a visual aberration, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through these merits, may sentient beings attain the rank of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from samsara's ocean, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. The Heart of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time, the Bhagawan was dwelling on massive Vulture's Mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagawan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the bodhisattva, mahasattva, Arya, Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Sharadvatiputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element, and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly, completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared. Tayata, Om, Gate, Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhi, Soha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagawan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagawan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharadvati Putra, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagawan. Short mandala offering. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Taking refuge and generating bodhicitta once in Tibetan and twice in English. Sangye chodong sokki chognam la, jantru bardu dagni kyabsu chi, dagi chunyengi pesunamgi, rola penshir sangye druparsho. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings.
So thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to continue now the commentary with Will verse 90, and this is the Venerable Joan translation. So I'm using her numbers as the main sort of base, and then when we refer to the Burson translation, I'll indicate. But just so you can recall, when you look at the homework, the verse citations there are for the Venerable Joan translation, just to stop any confusion that might arise. So Will verse 90. Whenever we act without doing even one thing properly, we do every deed that is unsuitable, rant and rave on the head of the conception that brings about our ruin, to the hearts of the enemy, the self, and the executioner, Maraya. And the Burson translation which will be we do not. Here we go. Oops. all the things we do. Oh, here we go, 91. All the things we do, we don't do even once. For improper behavior takes up all our time. Trample him, etc. So I find the syntax in the Berzin translation useful, as it presents a causal link between the experiences described in the opening lines. We fail to perform even a single time those things we should do due to improper behavior consuming all our time. The emphasis is therefore on the consequences of improper behavior consuming all our time. Consequently, we fail to be productive. Not even the things we plan to do and for the first time are accomplished. If we view this situation from the point of view of the perspective of a bodhisattva, it becomes obvious the sheer extent to which, for ordinary beings such as ourselves, self-cherishing is devouring all our energies and precious time. For example, a bodhisattva on the path of preparation, whose mind is probably suffused with the conceptual realization of emptiness, as a result, falls no longer under the sway of the afflictions such as anger and desire, and the karmic imprints are also inoperative. So it's important to understand that a bodhisattva on the path of preparation are not beings like us. They are not beings who waste any time whatsoever. During the state of meditative equipoise, their mind is single-pointedly focused upon emptiness, whereas at the very moment that they arise from that state of meditative equipoise, their mind spontaneously falls under the sway of love, compassion, and bodhicitta. They therefore no longer fall under the control or the sway of affliction, such as pride, anger, and so forth. You could say, perhaps, that these afflictions no longer exist for them. So how incredibly inspiring it is to consider that we also can reach such a state when, not meditating on profound reality, we are spontaneously under the sway of love, compassion, and bodhicitta, thereby ensuring that our task of reaching enlightenment for the benefit of others is unstoppable and uninterrupted. So the gist of this verse is that we must overcome our obsessive short-term focus on immediate self-cherishing benefits. And by examining our minds, the contents of our minds, very carefully, see if we can find ways of sacrificing some of our comfort, freedom, and what we consider to be freedoms and enjoyments. I say considered because they're considered to be freedoms according to the perspective of the self-cherishing mind. Of course, that's a trap. Sometimes giving up some of these things will seem counterproductive from a self-cherishing point of view, such as stepping back from partaking of desire objects, for example. But this is precisely the point, that we can construe the opposite or the performance of virtuous actions as their opposite, negative one speaks to the enormity of our self-cherishing concern. So the point is here that if we think we're going to lose something vital to who we are as an identity, as a person, by giving up holding on to some of these objects of desire, then that very degree that we can't let go is indicating how much work there is to be done to loosen the grip, let it go of self-cherishing. Conversely, once one has generated an uncontrived mind of bodhicitta within one's mind stream, and that's done on the basis of having generated an uncontrived mind of definite emergence, truly understanding the meaning of renunciation, we're then in a position to make our thoughts and deeds become virtuous because they are being upheld by these minds of definite emergence and are being upheld by the mind of bodhicitta. So if we just take the mind of renunciation in itself, the very fact that we've been able to generate an uncontrived renunciation on our mind stream means that we can be considered, from a Hinayana perspective, to have entered the path for the first time and to have become a path enterer. From a bodhisattva's perspective, when we generate uncontrived bodhicitta within our mental continuum for the first time, we're said to have stepped onto the stages and paths of the bodhisattva. So to enter I think covered that, I think. So these are topics that are taught within Salam, grounds and paths. And you will notice if you study your other BP modules that grounds and paths, according to Tantra, is one of those. And so they're very, very profound teachings indeed. So we'll jump now to Will verse 91, General Venerable Joan translation. Oh, you who have the force and strength of one possessing the truth body of a Sagata that destroys the insidious demon of the view of the self, you have a mace as a weapon, the exalted wisdom of selflessness. Spin it 3 times overhead without hesitation. And Alex Berzin in verse 92, O mighty destroyer of selfish demons, with body of wisdom unchanged from all bonds, Yamantaka, come brandish your skull-headed bludgeon of egoless wisdom of bliss and voidness. Without any misgivings, now wield your fierce weapon and swing it wrathfully 3 times around your head. So this verse signals a significant shift of focus, because once again, the author is asking us to directly appeal to the great wrathful Yamantaka, one endowed with perfect force and strength, because possessing the truth body of a Sagata, i.e., Yamantaka is a fully enlightened being, signaled by his possession of the truth body of a Sugata. So we last saw this kind of direct appeal in verse 50, which read, now spin the sharp weapons of actions overhead, furiously spin them 3 times overhead, spread your legs the 2 truths, open wide your eyes, method and wisdom, bearing the fangs of the 4 powers, pierce the enemy. So it's a similar kind of imploring from the depths of our heart. So in our current verse, Sugata is an honorary epithet for the Buddha. Su means good, and Gata is a past passive participle of to go. So putting them together, we have one thus gone to goodness, inverted commas. We are therefore praising Yamantaka while imploring him as the embodiment of perfect enlightenment. But we're also summonsing him. This is very clear when Berzin's translation says, Yamantaka, come brandish your skull-headed bludgeon of egoless wisdom of voidness and bliss. So in this context, the exclamatory O with which the verse opens is a sound, a kind of, what's the word for it? A semiotic cry, Christava would call it, coming from pre-symbolic language. It's one example of one, when you hear shocking news and you go, oh, it's not sort of language as such. It's almost a physiological outpouring of muscular spasm that causes this sort of gesture to take place. So similarly here, the O implies some kind of revelation. Geshe Jumpa Gatso suggests two possible meanings. First, the O can be a kind of cry of dismay at having seen the faults of self-cherishing explained above. But it can also be amazement at the good qualities of the exalted body, exalted speech, and exalted mind of the great wrathful one, Yamataka, who destroys them. So we need here to also define the truth body. When Burzum says in the second line, the body of wisdom, unchained from all bonds, the reference is to the truth body of a Buddha. So the truth body represents the power possessed by all living beings to destroy self-grasping in this context. The Venerable Jones translation similarly indicates one possessing the truth body of Siddhartha that destroys the insidious demon of the view of the self. So if we want to go into a little bit more depth here, we can talk about the nature truth body, which is a reference to the void nature of the Buddha's omniscient mind. And we can also refer to the wisdom truth body, which is the conscious state of the Buddha's mind, which understands, which comprehends instantaneously all there is to know. And this quality is something attained only by Buddhas. And then we can talk of other bodies of a Buddha, such as the bliss or enjoyment body, and the Nirvana, which is the transformation of this bliss body, which is only available to the cognition of Aryas and above, very highly realized beings. The Nirvana is a more palpable form of the enlightened body that ordinary beings with afflictions can see and hear with their own eyes. So it's not that the Buddha sort of puts out these Dharma, these different kayas at different times. They're all present continuously together. So, but having said this, Geshe Doga indicates that unlike the truth body, the enlightened body, being's physical or form body, is not a direct antidote to self-grasping. However, it's because enlightened beings by definition possess the truth body of the omniscient mind within them, which is the antidote, that they have power, the body has power to eradicate self-grasping. So Geshe Gatso makes a similar point in the statement, the Saggata that exists both conventionally and ultimately refers to the interpretive meaning Saggata. And this is the Yamataka who appears in the aspect of having form and shape. Furthermore, from the point of view of the interpretive meaning, Yamataka, that aspect having form and shape alone is not able to destroy self-grasping. However, by possessing the truth body, that is, by the force of possessing the definitive meaning Yamataka, which is the exalted wisdom of non-dual bliss and emptiness in his mental or her mental continuum, that Buddha is said to have the force and strength due to possessing the outstanding force, strength, and ability to eradicate self-grasping. So, in other words, by referring to Yamataka as the one possessing the truth body of a Buddha, as this verse is doing, it necessarily entails that Yamataka also possesses the enjoyment or bliss body and the emanation body. One can't subtract one body and leave the others. In the third line, in the Venerable Jones translation, there is an explicit reference to self-grasping. 1, 2, 3, selflessness. Oh yes, actually, here we are, the insidious demon of the view of the self. The reason it's necessary to destroy this particular insidious demon of the view of the self is that it misconceives the way in which we cognize the I. This self-grasping regards the I as if it exists independently, inherently, from its own side, as though able to set itself up. This is the I which, when we hear some good news, says Geshe Doga, he's giving an example, an experience here, feels very pleased. When it hears some bad news, it becomes very upset. So we must ask ourselves the meaning of self-grasping in terms of exploring it within our own experience. And it's recommended in many commentaries that one can particularly investigate one's perception of the way the I exists in a situation where one experiences the I arising very, very strongly. Such a situation is when we're overwhelmed with powerful emotions, for example. They can either be anger or desire, grief, even extreme excitement, and so forth. At such a time, this I appears concretely right where it appears and seems to address everything else from where it is. It is totally autonomously located as a fundamental I, unrelated to dependence on any other phenomena. It might have a relationship, appear to have relationships, but it doesn't feel dependent on them. It is completely there on the spot where it appears to be, without relying on causes and conditions, without relying on parts, without relying on being merely imputed or nominally imputed by the mind. So in the oral instructions for realizing emptiness, it's recommended that we do try to gain a sense of this I, which is referred to as the object of negation, because it's that hypostasticized, that extremely elaborated self that exceeds the merely imputed self, which does legitimately exist. The whole problem for us is that the superimposed false I on top of the merely imputed I become mixed, and an ordinary mind cannot tease those apart. So if we're searching for the I in meditation, which is going to be classified as the object of negation, we're not looking for an artificially, philosophically derived notion of an I and then find out whether it exists or not. We're trying to gain this kind of primordial, normal sense of an I. And so it's recommended within the oral tradition that we only use a tiny little portion of the mind while we're doing this meditation. So the main, to check, the main energies being put into invoking a very powerful sense of I. And then with a tiny corner, like a fish swimming in the sea, the ocean, we maneuver around it to see how it is appearing. If you do that too forcefully, that sense of the I will prove fugitive and will sink back into the appearance of the aggregates. So there's a kind of delicate balance here between trying and not trying. So anyway, this is just to be mentioned in advance. So Geshe Doga says, unlike at normal times, the I at such times of extreme emotion is vivid. It is the I that cannot tolerate these words. And I know this feeling because when someone's, I'm sure you don't know this, but when someone really insults you, like really hits the spot, you go, oh, this I is absolutely monumentally there. Nothing else, just this I. That is the object of negation. It's there in subtle forms in other ways at other times, but here it is in its sort of monstrous proportions. It is so vivid, says Geshe Doga, so concrete at such times, you almost feel as though you could touch it. So at such a time, the meditation instruction is to check on how this I exists. It will appear to exist as though self-sufficient It will appear to exist as though by itself, without depending on any other phenomena. So when the I tells us that it cannot tolerate those unpleasant words, our immediate response, of course, is to generate anger or hatred towards the speaker. So this anger is caused by the misconception about the way this I exists. So we've got this, I'm insulted, and it's the enormity of that experience of this self-existent I that is the reason why we send out a volley in the form of an attack. And so our response is the other half of the inflated I. The two are working in tandem. And this is the whole problem. We need to work on this in order to quell the afflictions in this place where they appear. It's said that this mind realizing emptiness solves all the problems of the afflictions because it cuts them off at the very, very root, the very base. There's nothing more important than to do a search towards this meaning. So this is a vital topic and one we will return to. As I mentioned, I'm going to attempt to present some of the ideas, particularly in the last class. But it also indicates how necessary it is to set up very carefully the initial stages of the meditation, because one of the common problems that people have when they're approaching this topic is they assume that if we can't locate a self-existent I, we search for it, we can't find it, that we mustn't have an I at all. And if we fall into this kind of train of thought, we run a risk of tumbling to what's referred to in Buddhism as nihilism. We'll devalue the actual conventional existence of the I, which, as I could mention now in relation to our topic of dependent arising, is a dependent arising. It does exist as a dependent arising. So the self-cherishing mind, on the other hand, is an attitude whereby one cherishes the I or self above everyone else. One sees oneself as more significant than all other beings. So returning to the words of the verse, and now referring to the Burson translation, the second line, with body of wisdom unchained from all bonds, reveals the antidote to the self-cherishing mind. The main antidote is the wisdom that realizes selflessness. When one gains that wisdom, one can counteract self-grasping. The wisdom that realizes selflessness is able to prove self-grasping as being a wrong view. So the more one develops the wisdom of selflessness, the more one's self-grasping will diminish. This is really crucial. It's like, the two sides of a scale. When self-grasping is completely uprooted from the mind, we'll achieve the state of liberation from cyclic existence. So, thus, Yamataka is one endowed with a body of wisdom unchained from all bonds, because all cognitive restraints, including the obscurations to liberation and the obscurations to omniscience, have been completely transcended. Yamataka's body is therefore totally free of bonds or restrictions of any kind. So we could, from this point of view, call it miraculous, couldn't we? Because it can spontaneously manifest in countless manifestations according to the particular moment of the karmic potential of any individual being within the countless beings throughout the countless universe. So the mace, which is Yamataka's holding, is the exalted wisdom of selflessness that alone destroys self-grasping. And more specifically, this exalted wisdom is being referred to here as the non-dual bliss and emptiness, which is the inseparable union of exalted wisdom of selflessness with method. A method within a tantric framework here is being labelled upon great bliss. So it's the union of great bliss and emptiness creates this potent, unbelievably potent tool. So Geshe Jumper Gutso indicates that this selflessness indicated in line 3 is shared with the perfection wisdom, whereas this selfless wisdom, referred to here as non-dual bliss and emptiness, is unique to the Hatha Yoga Tantric presentation. The reason for this is there are particular methods for generating great bliss within Hatha Yoga Tantra to do with the channels and so forth. And the emptiness that's realized is the same, but the mind that realizes it is more subtle, more penetrating, more powerful. And so this is an incredible clue as to one of the incredible reasons for practicing Hatha Yoga Tantra. But it also indicates that it's not going to have any real meaning unless we've understood the meaning of emptiness. So spinning it 3 times overhead is referring to 3 objects to be destroyed: self-grasping, the self-cherishing produced by it, and the contaminated aggregates produced by both of them. Geshe Jumper Gutso in his commentary refers to just the form aggregate in this 3rd swing, but I think it amounts to the same thing, as the 5 aggregates are found as a composite, except in the form realm, where we can have the other 4 without the form aggregate. But anyway, the point is that spinning it 3 times means we have to abandon all 3. And you'll recall that in verse 50, we also had reference to spinning the weapons 3 times overhead. And in that context, the first swinging was conventional bodhicitta, the second was ultimate bodhicitta, and the third was the union of conventional and ultimate bodhicitta. So I think we can correlate the 2 without any contradiction whatsoever. Conventional bodhicitta overcomes self-cherishing. Ultimate bodhicitta overcomes self-grasping. And the union of the 2 overcomes the contaminated aggregates via the acquisition, or the, we can't really say production as such, but the accomplishment of the Buddha's 2 bodies, the Rupakaya and the Dharmakaya. So I just thought to add a little intract here, I've written in my notes a poignant note on weapons, given the situation in Ukraine. While giving his commentary on this point in the text, Geshe Doga said, "There are many wrathful-looking deities who hold all kinds of weapons that are directed at an inner enemy. However, modern technology has given us many more weapons, which are all directed outside towards others." The famous Geshe Ben said he would hold a spear or a weapon only for one reason: to destroy his own inner enemies. So this is very, very profound, of course, and also very, very moving. If only we turned our weapons to destroy the inner demon of selfishness, we wouldn't have wars, would we? We wouldn't have these terrible struggles. We wouldn't have mothers fleeing their babies in their arms from bombed out homes and so forth. Unbelievable horror, really, torment. So Geshe Ben's comment is drawing us to the essential need to be vigilant and alert about the inner enemy. And so Geshe Ben said, when the inner enemy relaxes, you too can relax. But if the inner enemy is not relaxed, you must remain more vigilant and alert than before. So this is really describing skillful means here. If we try too hard to erase self-cherishing, we're going to kind of exhaust ourselves and fall over. So there'll be times when we're simply enjoying something beautiful, perhaps, and we can offer that in our minds to others. We can use it as a base of virtue, but we needn't be attacking ourselves for being self-cherishing at that moment. But if we're generating a negative thought, such as being jealous of someone for having a better holiday than we're having currently, that's the moment to be vigilant. And so I'm just throwing that in for good measure. So another even more esoteric reference to the brandishing the weapon 3 times, the mace 3 times, is the first swinging is reference to the illusory body, the second to the clear light, and the third to their union. And this kind of subtle explanation is found within the context of completion stage highest yoga tantra. So for some students will be exploring these topics in their basic program when they do the grounds and paths of highest yoga tantra. So I think I'll leave that there and jump to verse 92. Please execute this enemy with your great ferocious posture. Please destroy the bad conception of your great, with your great wisdom. Please protect us from the actions with your great compassion. Please be sure to annihilate the self. So we're still imploring directly Yamantaka. So what is the bad conception that we must destroy? In the Berzin translation, it's given as ego concepts. And these are to be burst by their direct antagonistic antidote, wisdom's great might. You see that here in the second line. Burst ego concepts with your wisdom's great might. So this is a reference to wisdom realizing emptiness, which is the direct antidote to bad conceptions. This was unambiguously identified in the last verse, which read, "O mighty destroyer of selfishness demons, with body of wisdom unchained from all bonds." So we'll now move to verse 93. All the dukkha that exists on the ground of psychic existence, please be sure to heap it on this self-grasping. Wherever any of the 5 afflictions exist, please be sure to heap it on this one of similar type. So I just want to do a little bit of a gloss here on dukkha, which is left untranslated but due to the difficulty of finding an easy or convenient linguistic equivalent in English. Sometimes it's simply translated as suffering, but this isn't particularly helpful. Venerable Thupten Chodron and His Holiness in their books, collaborative books, consider it to be a better translation to be unsatisfactoriness. This better captures the pervasive quality intended. In other words, if we think of something as suffering, we tend to zero in on those very obvious, palpable moments of suffering. But if you think of unsatisfactoriness, it has a much more sort of invasive, polluting quality throughout many, many, many different things. We can't draw the same clear boundaries around it. So it gives us a better idea of what is meant. So His Holiness explains, the process of attaining Nirvana begins with the first truth. nature of dukkha. The truth of suffering is often translated, isn't the first noble truth. The nature of dukkha and the various kinds of unsatisfactory circumstances and sufferings that afflict beings in cyclic existence. When some people hear this, says His Holiness, they fear that reflecting on their suffering may only make it worse, and thereby believe that no benefit will come from learning about the Buddha's teachings. This would be true if it were impossible to free ourselves from the causes of dukkha. However, since the root cause of dukkha, ignorance, is a mental factor that misapprehends reality and grasps phenomena as inherently existent, is erroneous. Because it's erroneous, it can be eliminated by the wisdom that sees things as they really are, as empty of inherent existence. So His Holiness goes on, by gradually eradicating ignorance and other afflictions, we can bring greater satisfaction and attain the final true cessation of dukkha and its causes. And we call this Nirvana. While Nirvana might sound like a far-off goal, we can easily see steps going in that direction. The more we cease anger, the greater harmony we experience. As the more we practice generosity, the less greed we experience, etc., etc. So we attain greater and greater contentment. As we gradually reduce ignorance and afflictions through application of wisdom, tranquility and fulfillment correspondingly increase, cultivating in Nirvana. So if we're looking at this presentation in sort of technical detail, we can talk, I won't go into this now, but I just mentioned, we can give a threefold classification of the dukkha of pain, dukkha of change, and dukkha of all pervasive composite. This third one, sometimes different translations for it, but it's all pervasive dukkha of conditioning, if you like, is the very fact that we have a body and mind that is not under our control. Without choice, we take a body when we're born, and this body falls ill, ages, and dies. Between birth and death, we experience problems, even though we try to avoid them. We cannot obtain everything we want, even though we try so hard to get them. And even when our desires are fulfilled, that happiness is not stable. We become disillusioned and separated from what we crave. So this presentation of this third type of dukkha, pervasive dukkha of conditioning, is a unique presentation to Buddha Dharma. So I just mentioned that. It gives a very great profundity to the Buddha's teachings. So the second and third lines say, all the dukkha that exists on the ground of cyclic existence, please be sure to heap it on this self-grasping. We've got propositional sort of terms here, prepositions. And this is very clear because all problems can be traced back to the root cause, the view of self-grasping and the self-cherishing mind that arises in dependence on it. Therefore, to direct our blame anywhere else is not only a waste of time, but it can reap dire consequences. This is because if we attempt to work elsewhere and leave it untouched, we'll leave the actual root of our own dukkha entirely untouched, while creating all kinds of mayhem due to our afflicted minds running rampant. So the Burson translation to this verse reads, with all the sufferings that others experience, smother completely our selfish concern. The sufferings of others arise from 5 poisons, Thus, whichever delusion afflicts other beings, take it to smother delusions of self. So I'm not going to give commentary on the 5 poisons, but this idea of taking it to smother delusions of the self is a direct, clear reference to Tonlen practice. It clearly instructs us to directly employ the unbelievably powerful Tonlen method to not just tackle these difficult and dangerous circumstances charged by the 5 afflictions, but to actually utilize them to empower our path. In other words, we can transform our situation by exploiting adverse circumstances, by using them as catalysts to engage the path. This is the essence of lojong, or mind training practice. As Geshe Doga says in commentary to this verse, this meditation described literally says, may all the suffering of all other sentient beings in this worldly existence fall upon this self-cherishing mind. And the purpose of this falling upon is to destroy the self-cherishing mind, to eliminate it. We also take on all the suffering that exists onto this self-cherishing mind, because it's this mind that causes all the suffering. This is quite, an extraordinary technique, isn't it? The problem that has been created by self-cherishing is being used as the weapon to destroy it in meditation. And I think even on a sort of psychophysiological level, this is very, very special, isn't it? Because rather than blocking ourselves from change, we ride the experience and turn it into our practice in this very organic, direct way. And so it doesn't involve the kinds of frustrations and bottling up of emotions. Sometimes in presentations on Buddhist meditation to so-called beginners, I say so-called because you never know who's a beginner in Buddhism, because we don't know what people's karmic backgrounds are in their other lives. Yeah, I might leave that, but yeah, I'll leave that altogether. I think I've lost my way there for a moment. So we take this self-cherishing mind that resides at the very core of our heart, and we destroy it using the powers of the technique. Oh, so sorry, I'm just recollecting back. What they say is you have to express anger. It's therapeutic to express anger. You've heard this yourself. It's, psychologically therapeutic. Get the anger out, say what it is, just purge it from your body. Otherwise, it's going to make you sick. It might even give you cancer, like really quite heavy duty stuff. Buddhism's not saying that. It's saying, recognize you've got a problem, transform it, and then give everyone else what they need for their happiness. Totally different strategy, radically different strategy. So this comes as quite a challenge to the Western ego psychology mind, which believes in purging. So I'm not criticizing here. I'm just sort of pointing out there are some fundamental differences in approach here. So I think if we're working on some of our tensions in a play pit with a counsellor, maybe that's okay, because we're sort of transacting experience in a safe environment. That's, again, quite different from going out there. And some of us might remember a few years ago, we had a book called Toxic Parents. Does anyone remember that book? It was a Times bestseller. It went right to the top. Millions of copies were sold. And it said that you had to identify what your parents had done to destroy your happiness as an adult, and then confront them. So you actually had to sort of say, Mum, I'm coming home next Thursday, and I've got something special to tell you. And you tell them that they were toxic, and they did this when you were 4, and this was 5, and that's why you've got a dysfunctional relationship. You've now got an alcohol problem, and whatever. You've left your partner and your family, your kids are separated, etc., etc. a number of parents were so distressed at their children divulging their toxic parent methodology that they suicided. And so the books dropped out of flavor quite quickly. Another series of books, I'm still getting on, I always get into contentious ground, was The Wish. That had some similar problems too, where whatever you wish would come true. So you can see here that if that's not being carefully monitored in terms of self-cherishing, we're actually training, having a more powerful self-cherishing mind. So Geshe Doga says, with the meditation of giving and taking, we give all of our happiness to other sentient beings and we take all their sufferings onto ourselves. We take it upon this self-cherishing mind that resides at the very core of our heart. To do this very effectively and to cultivate the technique properly, we need to know the meaning of cultivating love, compassion, and bodhicitta towards other beings. So it's the intensity of the love we feel towards other beings that motivates us to give happiness to them. And it's the intensity of our compassion for other sentient beings that motivates us to take suffering from them. So I just mentioned that, how important it is to develop these minds in order to practice. And it's also said that we can, when we're talking of giving, we can give to all beings, including our spiritual gurus. We can give our body, our material possessions, and our virtuous minds. But it's said to not be appropriate, obviously, to take from those who are very high on the spiritual paths. Geshe Doga indicates that it's inauspicious, for example, to imagine or even think of one's own spiritual guru as possessing any type of suffering. So within the guru devotion section of the Lam Rim, we have a very extensive presentation here of the different ways and methods of seeing one's teacher as an enlightened being. I'm not referring to myself here, obviously, an enlightened being that has many, many powers. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche is very, very strong on this point in his teachings. However, I do adjust that technique a little bit. And at the time of Lama Zopa Rinpoche manifesting illness a number of years ago, while at a Teacher Centre, I was on the retreat at the time. I just wonder how to put this really. When I went to Bodh Gaya, I did Tonlin practice at the stupa because it's such a powerful practice to do there. And I visualized taking on all of the karmic obstructions of the students that were preventing Lama Zopa from manifesting a long lifetime. And did that from the very bottom of my heart. So I mentioned that not to talk about my practice sort of in a boastful way, but to mention again that Lama Zopa Rinpoche asked me to talk about my own Tonlin practice. And so I did that as my long life practice for Lama Zopa Rinpoche and continue to do that. Because it said that if we don't have the merit to have our teachers, the teachers will sort of reabsorb into the Dharmakaya, if you like. They won't manifest in a palpable form that we can actually reach or touch or communicate with. So it's up to us to create the causes. So one of the reasons why the teacher might sort of apparently disappear would be breaking vows and commitments, for example. So if we're taking bodhisattva vows and comes with certain commitments not to kill and so forth, and then we do perform those actions, it's said to be very damaging of our karmic relationship with our preceptor who gave us those vows. So we honor our teacher by observing our vows in this very special karmic way. It's an incredibly potent karmic bond. And because of that, it can either be very, very powerful in a positive way, or it can be kind of detrimental, more so if we do a negative action. The same as if we kill our parent, it's more karmically potent than killing a stranger. It's not to say that they're both not non-virtues, they are, but because our parent is so karmically close to us in this lifetime, the karma of killing them is particularly powerful. It's called a heinous crime for that reason. So breaking vows and commitments is similar in that way. So might leave that there and go to verse 95. Now we should lay all the blame on just this one, the Venerable Joan. Cultivate great gratitude towards other migratory beings. Take that not wanted by others upon our own continuum and dedicate our virtue to all migratory beings. And Berzin says, all that is wrong can be traced to one source, our concern for ourselves, whom we cherish the most. We must meditate now on the kindness of others, accepting the suffering that they never wished for. We must dedicate fully our virtues for all. So Geshe Doga explains this first line, now we should lay all the blame on just the one, as the essence of the thought transformation teaching. We should direct all blame to one source, the self-cherishing mind within us. All that is wrong can be traced to one source. So we need to gain an absolute conviction that the self-cherishing mind is the source of all our problems. Therefore, from now onwards, if anything goes wrong in our lives or relationships, we should complain to ourselves about our own self-cherishing mind rather than complain about others. So this is going to require making very fundamental shifts in the way we think. We think that person's always causing me problems, or why doesn't that person help me? Or why does that person abuse me? So this kind of thought structure is part of the problem of self-cherishing and needs to be changed. Instead, we need to constantly think of how we can show them love and kindness and benefit and understand their needs and know the methods to fulfilling those needs. And as His Holiness is always indicating and stressing, this is essential because we live in a global community with others. Even our ability to have a mouthful of food is dependent on the kindness of others. So there's a very beautiful example here of meditating on kindness, but told by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He says, each time sentient beings have been our mothers, they have shown us the same kindness, and this holds true for the mothers of the animal kingdom as well as for much of the world of humankind. Even insects mother their offspring and rear them with all their ability. To really think about this is so touching and heartwarming that it can make one's hair stand on end. It is very moving the way mother birds, for example, rear their young. High on the walls of the Patala in Lhasa, wild ducks would make their nests. When the young were being raised, the mother would pluck her own feathers, becoming cold and weak, in order to line the nest for her offspring. When the time came for the ducklings to leave the nest, the parents had to throw them out so that they fell many stories before reaching the ground. This knocked them unconscious, leaving them prey to eagles, hawks, and crows. The stunned birds would try to run and fly, but often would be carried away. The parents, although helpless against such foes, tried as much as they could to protect their young. They walked around them, which was as much as they could do, putting themselves at danger. They're offering themselves as a substitute, as a lure, and in this way gradually tried to lead offspring to the safety of the lake. So His Holiness then elaborates. He says, not only human mothers, but all mothers down to the smallest insect strive to give all they can to their offspring. Therefore, once we have transformed our negative attitudes of intense attachment, hatred, or total indifference towards others into an even unbiased attitude, a state of equanimity, we can meditate on the recognition of all beings as our mothers. As it is said, and His Holiness quotes, in the ground of equanimity, moistened with the water of love, the seed of compassion is constantly sown, giving rise to the ultimate fruit from the flourishing tree of the awakening mind. So just how precious sentient beings are will be understood from the very depths of our hearts upon an honest investigation of the kindness they have rendered us. So if we haven't done that recollection deeply, in retreat preferably, how kind this being, how kind is this being, how unbelievably kind is this being, we'll have no opportunity of wishing to repay their kindness. We'll have no forceful wish to repay their kindness, to help them in any way. So His Holiness concludes, since all beings have been extremely kind to us throughout infinite lifetimes, we should endeavour to repay their kindness. To do otherwise, to remain quite unconcerned about their welfare, and to remain totally preoccupied with our own benefit, is actually very callous, inconsiderate, and unkind. So the last two lines are accepting, in the Berzin translation, accepting the suffering that they never wish for, we must dedicate fully our virtues to others. The preceding lines referred to how all other beings have been kind to one, as a result of which we have thought of engaging in the meditation of giving and taking. So Geshe Doga here mentions in a very interesting way that this technique involves taking and giving at the level of the imagination. So we might therefore think, does it have any benefit if it's merely wishful thinking, if you like? Is there any purpose in the technique? And the answer is yes, because it's a mind training, so that when we arise from meditation and we next see that person whom we've taken their suffering from and given happiness, we'll be open to them in a way that wasn't conceivable before. This isn't a technical point, it's an actual point. We'll become more aware, more open, more sensitive, but not more fragile. We often equate sensitivity with fragility or vulnerability. Here it's not, it's a clear vision based on love and compassion that will embrace the object, the person, with love and compassion. So I leave that with you. It's very, very worth putting some time into contemplating these points. So we'll jump now to will verse 96. Thus, by taking upon ourselves all that is done in the three times, by the three doors of other migratory beings, just as the peacocks possess the splendour of poison, may the afflictions become an assistant to our enlightenment. So this furthers the imperative that we perform the Tonlin meditation. Specifically, it's referring to the taking part, where we pray that others being suffering and its causes, delusions, and negative karmas are taken upon our self-cherishing. In their place, we give the resources and means to achieving happiness and ultimate goodness. So, in other words, Tonlen can be seen like a rehearsal. Geshe Doga says it's a bit like training our mind to get used to the thought of giving and of sympathy towards others. In other words, what we do in meditation is a bit like rehearsing our mind with this thought of giving and taking, in the sense of giving all happiness and eliminating all suffering. If we do well in the meditation, then later on we'll be able to integrate giving and taking into our actions and thereby benefit others directly. So of course, this is the essential thing, isn't it? To directly benefit them. In the meditation, we're only benefiting them indirectly, but this leads to a capacity to, at the very first opportunity, benefit them directly. And at the same time, it overcomes or counteracts deluded views. So the conclusion, not only should we engage in this meditation to train our mind in giving and taking, or in love and compassion, at the same time, as much as possible, we should try to directly benefit others whenever there are opportunities. And so the reference here to the peacock possessing the splendor of poison, may the afflictions become an assistance to our enlightenment, invokes the first three stanzas of our root text. And I'll just read those. I won't give any further commentary. Just as when peacocks wander in jungles of lethal poison, although there are extremely beautiful medicinal gardens, the flocks of peacocks do not delight in them, but instead are nourished by the essence of the lethal poison. Similarly, when the heroes enter the jungle of psychic existence, although there are beautiful gardens of splendid happiness, the heroes do not become attached to them, for those brave-minded ones thrive in the jungle of suffering. Because of that, those who are under the power of the cowardice that eagerly pursues happiness and pleasure spend their time in suffering, while the brave-minded ones who willingly accept suffering are always happy due to the strength of their courage. So we'll move now to verse 97, Venerable Joan translation. By giving our roots of virtue to migratory beings, just as a crow that has eaten poison is cured by medicine, may we uphold the life of liberation of all beings, and may they quickly attain the Buddhahood of the Sagata. So this verse continues the Tonlen instruction, and it does so in the form of a prayer. May the meditation I perform be effective in relieving the sufferings of all other beings and bringing them everlasting happiness. So we can think of making this prayer to the Buddhas, to Yamataka, to the teachers, to the holy refuge objects, directly making this appeal. So the analogy of the crow here is, or it represents ordinary beings. It's acting as a stand-in for ordinary beings who, like us, have minds dominated by the delusions and whose main experience is one of suffering. However, even a crow, just like ourselves, can find an antidote to their suffering and the causes of their suffering. So I might run it, it's 25 past. I wanted to tackle the next 5 verses quite quickly, but not quickly in terms of content, because they're incredibly important. And it's dealing with the crucial nature of the act of dedication. So when we say, may we uphold, then may they, we're using a dedication in a very dynamic way. It's on the one hand an aspirational promise that we'll consolidate the positive actions we have done as well as produce the karmic causes for even more powerful positive actions to be done in the future. So this form of dedicating our wish, if you like, is very much concerned with a long-term vision. But that long-term vision is based on an immediate lived engagement with those around us. So we're creating, in the midst of our current situation, these incredibly powerful, extensive, aspirational promises. And practicing in this way is an incredible source of inspiration and hope. So I'm going to read out the last verses now, which are in the form of a dedicational prayer. As long as we and those who have been our parents, without attaining enlightenment in the abode of Akanishta, due to our actions wander in the 6 migrations, may we support one another with a single mind. When, for even the welfare of a single migratory being, we fully enter the 3 bad migrations, may we extricate him from the suffering of the bad migrations without generating the conduct of the great beings. May the guardians of hell immediately develop the discrimination of us as lamas. May their weapons also transform into a rain of flowers, and free from harm, may they be refreshed by peace and happiness. May even the beings in the bad migrations attain clairvoyance and the Dharanis. Then take the body of a god or human and generate the mind of enlightenment. May they pay our kindness with the Dharma, and having taken us as their Lama, rely on us. So just to touch on the power of prayer, during Shakyamuni Buddha's time, Lama Tsongkhapa was born as a Brahmin who, as a young boy, offered the Buddha a crystal rosary and thereafter generated bodhicitta. So on that occasion, the Buddha prophesied to Ananda that the young Brahmin would one day revive the Buddhist doctrine and found a monastery called Ganden. So Shantideva, in his training anthology or compendium of training, says, in brief, however, protecting goodness is dedicating it to awakening. The noble Aksayamati Sutra says, quote, when wholesome actions are dedicated to awakening, they do not waste away until you sit upon the seat of awakening. As for example, Reverend Saradattaputra, when a drop of water has fallen into the great ocean, it does not waste away until the end of an eon. So dedication is a vow for the future. And this is clear from the following passage, which many of us will know as part of the confession ceremony to 35 Buddhas. May those Buddhas, blessed ones, pay attention to me. Whatever gifts I have given in this life or in previous lives while wandering in beginningless psychic existence, even so much as a mouthful of food to an animal, and whatever wholesome actions I have done while protecting moral discipline or through the power of celibacy, and whatever whole actions I have done while helping sentient beings to mature, and whatever is wholesome for me due to the awakening mind, and whatever wholesome actions I have that lead to the highest pristine awareness, having combined, gathered, and collected all of them together, I dedicate them to the most supreme, highest, genuine, full enlightened awakening. Just as all past Buddhas, blessed ones, dedicated goodness, and just as all future Buddhas, blessed ones, will dedicate goodness, and just as the Buddhas, blessed ones of the present in all 10 directions are dedicating goodness, now in the same way I also dedicate. I rejoice in all the goodness of everyone. I request all the Buddhas to remain in cyclic existence and teach. May I attain the highest pristine awareness. And from the same compendium of sutras, Shantideva is the author. He says, a bodhisattva great being who is carrying out wholesome actions when dedicating a whole action should arouse the following thought. These sentient beings do not have any wholesome actions by which they could save themselves. How much less so could they save others? I am now gathering wholesome actions for the sake of sentient beings. I dedicate this wholesome action to free all sentient beings, to provide light for all sentient beings, to teach all sentient beings, to liberate all sentient beings fully, to gain the trust of all sentient beings. For eons, I should be like the disk of the sun. I should expect no help from anyone else. I shouldn't make room for someone else and then remove the armor that is for sentient beings. And in the presence of all sentient beings, I should not stop my efforts to save all sentient beings. I should not cease destroying all forms of suffering through practicing dedication. I should not be possessive about small wholesome actions, nor satisfied with a small dedication. So it's necessary at this point to distinguish an aspirational prayer from a dedicational prayer. And Pabongka Rinpoche explains in his text, The Essence of the Vast and the Profound, which is a commentary on Lama Tsongkhapa's middle-length Lam Rim, that the dedication prayer has the unique feature of there being a substance that is the object being dedicated, and identifying that substance of dedication. So the prayer, in dependence on this, may I receive this and this result, is both a prayer and a dedication. When there is no substance as the object of dedication, such as in the future may I become this, this is a prayer, but not a dedication. So we need a merit, something of merit, some achievement of merit to offer towards the accomplishment of the wish. And it's this conjunction of the two that makes a dedication so karmically stable. Because this wish is totally geared towards all sentient beings and their complete perfect happiness, it has no limit to its power. So it's safe from being harmed or impaired, if you like, by the rising up of temporal afflicted minds that may occur 10 minutes after we've made this marvelous dedication. So we're sealing it off from getting lost. And so for a trainee bodhisattva, there is nothing more critical than making or tying our practices to extensive dedications in this way. So in other words, the substance of a dedication are the roots of virtue that we've accumulated and are therefore in a position to give. So a sutra states, the concordant condition of all dharmas depends upon the strength of your aspiration. Whatever dedication prayers one makes will result in the attainment of just that. The resulting in the attainment of just that is very profound, because it implies that if we dedicate towards a small, or we dedicate a small wholesome action towards a vast outcome, it will have that vast result. If you dedicate a large positive action to a small goal, it will bear a small result. So you can see here how critical it is that we make open out and make our dedications very extensive. And so dedication's said to be like holding the reins of a horse. We can make the horse go left or right just by a little twigging of the pressure on the lead, on the yoke and so forth. So in the same way, we steer the outcome of our positive actions to their future goals through the act of dedicating. So in other words, the dedication of merit predetermines the cause that your merit will support. And as we've said, the supreme dedication is on behalf of all other sentient beings that they might achieve the state of Buddhahood. So I just wanted to, I'm in the final bit of the presentation. When we were at the last Bendigo retreat, Kabje Zopa Rinpoche spent quite a lot of time talking about tipping the wish, putting a point on the wish. Don't just make a wish, make a wish with a point. Very, very clear articulation of what we want to arise as a result of dedicating this root of virtue. And so we notice in the verses that we've just read that it refers to may one day others respond to us as their Lama. This might seem like a kind of, having taken us as their Lama, rely upon us. This might seem like an arrogant, a kind of conceited ambition, but not in the light of what we've been saying about dedication. It's actually a form of responsibility, isn't it? If we want to guide people, we manifest in a form that will guide them skillfully and well. So an example of not tipping one's wish is probably a apocryphal story. It's a very comic one, though. In one of the Ganden monasteries one day during a puja, a young cow walked into the gompa. I've seen goats and cows walk into gompas in India, by the way. It's not an unlikely event. And it proceeded down the central aisle and then attempted to clamber onto the throne, the teaching throne. The teaching throne wasn't being used at that moment because often a teacher will sit in front of the throne because the throne would be there for His Holiness, for example. And a monk in the front row asked his teacher why the calf was doing that. And the Lama replied that calf had been a monk in a previous life, and he'd made dedicated to one day to sit on the Ganden throne, but he hadn't specified in what body form. So make sure your embellishments are meaningful. So after that retreat, when I had my diagnosis of myelodysplasia, which was, a terminal illness, a very serious one, obviously, all these things were sort of suddenly percolating, how do I practice in the last remaining moments and so forth. And I thought to myself, how am I going to point the wishes in the time that I've got left? I haven't got time. And I experienced some anxiety about not being able to practice purely enough at that time. And I went to see Geshe Doga and told him about my problem. And he laughed and replied, I'm sharing this with you because it was such a marvelous reply. He said, don't worry about that, Ross. Dedicate in the same way that His Holiness dedicates, which is to manifest in whichever form is best to serve the needs of sentient beings. And when I heard that, I was intensely relieved. What a marvelous dedication that is. How extraordinary is that? In whatever form will best serve the needs of sentient beings in all future times. One can really rest after having made a dedication like that. So I'll just for reasons of auspiciousness, really recite some of my favorite verses from Arya Shura's Aspiration in 70 stanzas. And these are very, very beautiful verses. Having realized the powers, heightened awarenesses, analytical knowledges may simultaneously be a benefit to sentient beings throughout the immeasurable expanse of the universe. Whatever countries where the name of Buddha has not entered the ear, there may I act according to the deeds of a Buddha through imparting his various methods. Until the sun, the teacher of the three worlds, rises here in this universe, may I, like the sun, dispel the darkness of ignorance from each and every embodied being. Whatever beings there are whose thoughts are saturated with evil and who have been rejected by many beings gone to bliss, may they be tamed by relying upon the sphere of action of my speech. By merely recollecting my name, recollecting my name, may all beings immediately be protected from fear, and may all misery of the three worlds be dispelled. So without a clear comprehension of the selflessness of persons and a deep understanding of dependent origination, whereby cause and effect can be found to validly function, such thoughts would be considered hyperinflated, perhaps even grandiose ravings of a megalomaniac. But the context is everything. So in verse 100, in the Burson translation, it says, "Then for even the sake of but one sentient being, may we gladly take birth in the three lower states, with enlightening conduct that never grows weak. May we lead all the beings in miserable rebirths out of their suffering and causes for pain." So not only are we courageously and fearlessly dedicating ourselves to engaging in a bodhisattva's practice, but we're also forging karmic pledges that may one day be perfectly fulfilled. So I'd like to propose here that this is real magical thinking. We're being invited to develop a creative habit of making powerful prayers in this way. So Geshe Doga says, the main cause of bodhisattvas being able to achieve what they want, that is, of being of service and benefiting other beings, is their courage, strong determination, and strong motivation. If we lack the bodhisattva's courage and spirit, all we can do is stand back and watch the sufferings of sentient beings and feel sorry for them. So we don't want to be like practitioners with no arms and no legs. So we also should make the same kinds of prayers as did the great bodhisattva Samantabhadra. Prayers are not an obligatory duty, and I've got here some matter of listlessly or even apathetically droning out words we've heard countless times before. Prayer is a fully fledged, vital modality of intense practice. It's a treasure to be held in the heart of the bodhisattva. It is even the force of aspirational prayer that empowers the bodhisattva to arise swiftly out of non-dual absorption into emptiness, upon emptiness, in order to benefit other beings. So that's a topic that we can discuss a little bit later. So Geshe Doga says, to some extent, in such prayers, we can find the answers to a lot of things in our lives that we cannot fully understand. For example, the way that the law of karma or cause and effect operates. Even if we cannot make prayers like this for all other beings, try to think of those beings who are close to you, even if it's just a dog or a cat. Whoever or whatever you are fond of, try to include them in your prayers. As you pray, you'll create the cause of some result. You can think that even in the immediate future, it might bear a result. Or if that was not to happen, you can at least think that the prayer will definitely bear a result in a future life. So I think that's a good spot to finish. And so we're going to move next week, as I mentioned, onto the verses dealing directly with selflessness. So it seemed a really appropriate way of reaching this point of the text. So thank you very much, and I'll ask Stephen to do the dedication.
Dedication prayers. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings, without exception, into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Long life prayers for His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world. To the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Lama Zopo Rinpoche, you who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers, honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Tenzin Osel Hita, Venerable One, to you whose kindness exceeds that of all the conquerors, for those wanderers in far-off places, especially the West, mindful of your loving concern for us in intentionally descending again into a family of a far distant land, we make this request. O Lama, please, please live long.
So I just wanted to just quickly mention the preparation for the exam. I'll need to talk more with Stephen, but I've heard from Olga Plankin, who is sort of the sort of manager really of the study program for FPMT, and she made it clear. I can actually read this part of her letter. She says, BPs, basic programs, are taught at various levels. That is the nature of the program, making it suitable to implement for as many centres as possible. We do not provide standard tests. The materials provided at the BP materials webpage are meant to indicate and not illustrate such different levels. Teachers or BP staff can provide tests as suitable to their audiences. The end of subject tests are intended as study tools to encourage involvement beyond mere attendance of the teachings and to provide closure to the specific subject. The test is also the minimum criterion for BP subject completion. Further criteria, if any, are set by the centre. Subject completion according to centre's criteria allows for eventual participation in the review and final exam as part of BP certification and so forth. So in other words, it's up to me how the exam takes place. And I'm delighted that I've got that freedom. But I thought you might wish to have a chat with Stephen as well, to give him any feelings about the exam that you're having, and he'll relay those back to me and I can take that into consideration. So are there any quick questions on that, or you're happy to? Yeah. So as I said before, I also see it as a study aid. If you do the online course for this subject, you have a blind examination. You don't see the questions until you enter the website, and you're not allowed to refer to any books or texts while you're doing the exam. I'm not going to stipulate that at all. It's just up to you to provide the sort of richest and most meaningful answers from your side that you feel you can. And so I'm going to be delighted to know that that's the way you're approaching it. So there'll be questions, in other words, that won't be designed to trick or trip. They'll be to invite a really heartfelt response to the subject matter that we've shared together. So with that, I think I'll go. So thank you very much for today, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week.